I want to keep these videos as short as possible. The idea is just to give you a bit of a guideline and assistance as you read through the chapter. Also, I'll be telling you about the discussion topics we'll be having in class, so make sure you think about those carefully before we meet. Finally, there are closed captions to help you with the English if you need them. Let's get started. We need to have some objectives for each lesson in the course. By the end of this chapter, and hopefully with the help of this video, you should have a decent understanding of why you want to be a language teacher, the basic flow of a language class, and what points are important to consider when observing a class. Make sure you keep these in mind as you go through the chapter. These are the topics we are going to cover in this chapter. It is pretty simple, so I'm going to be adding a little extra to the side. Make sure you read the chapter carefully and watch this video to fully prepare for class. Can you remember when you first decided that you wanted to become a teacher? How about that you wanted to be a language teacher? I remember being in grade 2 of elementary school, and I was teaching a grade 1 student some spelling. When that grade 1 student understood the spelling, I understood the feeling of someone learning a new thing because of me. There are plenty of reasons to become a language teacher. Maybe you enjoy the challenges that come with teaching, or perhaps you see teaching as a lifelong learning experience. You might simply enjoy languages and want to pass that knowledge on to others. Or, like me, the feeling of accomplishment that comes with teaching might be what called you. For our first discussion, I'd like you to talk about the reasons why you decided to become a language teacher. If you can, tell a story that includes the moment you decided that you wanted to be a teacher. It's through telling stories that we pass on knowledge and feelings to others. Be prepared with your stories to share with others in class. I'd like to follow the first discussion topic with another one about your experiences with teaching as a student. I imagine you have had many teachers in the past. Tell your experiences with good and, if you like, not so good teachers. On pages 3 to 8 of our textbook, we see a description of a lesson taught in Korea. I'd like you to read through the description of the lesson so you'll get a basic idea of the structure. Although it is not mentioned in the textbook, this lesson follows a PPP design. The PPP structure of a lesson is a very popular way of teaching. First, we have present. Here, the teacher introduces the topic and/or grammar point of the lesson for that day. Then we have practice. This is when students are given chances to practice. This might include repeating after the teacher, reading aloud, or doing drills. Finally, we have produce. It is at this stage when students are given the opportunity to produce their own English sentences or conversations while using the main topic or grammar point of the lesson. As you read through the lesson description, think about where each P of the PPP structure fits into the lesson. What do you think of the PPP structure? Some people dislike it, whereas others swear by it. I would like you to critically analyze the PPP structure, and we will have a discussion about this in class. When I say critically analyze it, I mean think about the strengths and weaknesses of this lesson structure. Then, decide whether you would like to use it in your own classes. If you prepare for this, with some examples of course, we can have some good discussions in class. I don't want to get into this too much here, but personally, I don't mind the PPP structure. However, I would like to add an extra P at the beginning, kind of like PPPP, or 4P I guess. I would like to see production 1 at the beginning, then production 2, which is a slightly more advanced version of the first production task, at the end. This way, the teachers can get an idea of how much students already know about the topic and/or grammar point, as well as get a clear idea of what points students already understand well, thus need little explanation in the presentation stage, and those points students don't understand well. This way, the teacher can provide a little more personalized coaching for the students. What do you think about 4P? If we have time, let's discuss this in more detail during class. Now we are going to analyze the lesson. When we analyze and give feedback on a lesson, usually we start by looking at the positive points. Then we consider the weaknesses and how they can be improved. Our textbook gives us 18 points on pages 8 to 10 to consider when we analyze this lesson. Obviously, these are all important, but I'd like to point out number 3. For me, there are 2 key points here. First, creating a segue, that is, a smooth transition between the opening small talk and the lesson itself. If you can do this successfully in your lessons, you might be able to create a lesson atmosphere in which students are learning before they realize that they are learning. And second, the teacher didn't just give students names of movies. She asked the students for movies that they had seen and then used those movies in the lesson. This can create a sense of agency, that is, a feeling that the students have control over their learning. This is a really important part of learning and teaching, and we will discuss this more in Chapter 5. Okay, so I would like to have one final discussion here. What I would like you to do is choose one of the 18 points given on pages 8 to 10. Of course, don't choose number 3, as I've already talked about that. So choose one of the points, then I would like you to have a discussion in your group. You can ask others for their opinions and express your ideas based on the questions in that point. Of course, if you want to, you can choose more than one. Well, it's just about time to wrap this chapter up. The main focus of this chapter was to think about how we look at lessons as a whole. How do we want to teach our classes? What do we want to look for when we are observing classes? In this course, you will have many chances to observe and analyze each other's model classes. So make sure you have a clear idea of what you are going to be focusing on in those. As with anything that you study, it is important to look at history and find out what ideas have been successful and why some ideas were not. There will be quite a lot of names and methods of teaching in this chapter. They might be difficult, but I really encourage you to try to remember these as much as you can. They are all important when it comes to discussions about language teaching. Now I warn you, this isn't going to be the most exciting chapter, so make sure you stock up on chocolate and coffee and whatever caffeine or sugar you need to stay awake. Hopefully by the end, you'll have a better understanding of ways that English has been taught to non-native speakers in the past, and you'll be able to use the strong points from these ways of teaching to get a few hints for when you are in the classroom. We have 4 main topics to cover in this video. We'll start by confirming the definitions of some terms we'll often hear in discussions about TESOL. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the different ways teachers have attempted to teach foreign languages to students in the past. Oh, just for your information, when I say TESOL, I mean teaching English as a foreign or other language. It'd be a good idea to remember this acronym. There are 5 terms on page 16 that you need to remember. Actually, there are 6, but I'll get to the 6th in a minute. A lot of people tend to mix some of these around a bit, but if you want to be accurate, it would be best to follow the descriptions given on page 16, which I have summarized even further here. The first point I'd like to make is the difference between approach and method. Basically, approach refers to the way you believe languages are learned effectively, and in turn, how they should be taught. Method, on the other hand, refers more to what is going to happen in the classroom, but it is a little broader than technique, which looks at the specific exercises, tasks, and activities that you do in the classroom. Now just be careful of the difference between curriculum and syllabus, which is the sixth term I was talking about a minute ago. The way that they are described in the textbook might be a little confusing. Generally, curriculum refers to the overall plan given by an institution which you have to complete in order to graduate. On the other hand, syllabus is about the weekly plans and guidelines for each subject within the curriculum. When you first entered university, you probably looked at a curriculum that you need to follow to graduate. At the beginning of this course, I gave you a syllabus to show you what you are going to do each week, the textbook we are going to use, assessment, and a few other specifics. I hope that is clear. Let's have a quick discussion about this topic. We understand that an approach refers to the beliefs someone has about teaching, language, and language learning. Imagine you have a teacher who is doing some study, and halfway through a course that he is teaching, decides that the way he has been thinking about teaching might not be the most effective way. Therefore, he decides to change the way he teaches. Now, because of the change in approach, students may become confused. Do you think that that teacher should change immediately, even though the course has already begun, or wait until the end of the course and he has new students? Get your ideas together and let's have a chat about this during class. So we need to start off by looking at the methods used in the earlier times of foreign language education. On this page, you can see summaries of 4 main methods that have been used in the past. The grammar translation method, or classic method, is pretty easy to understand, as it just requires students to translate the target language, or TL, into their L1, that is, first language. Although this method is yet to receive proof that it is highly effective for improving communication skills, it is still popular, probably because it is easy to teach. The series method started the trend to move away from translation and actually used the target language. It used a series of connected sentences in the classes to teach the students. The direct method developed the idea of not using translation even further and avoided grammar rules, encouraging students to pick up the target language like they acquired their first language. Then finally, the audiolingual method, which became popular around the time of the Second World War, focused on getting students to mimic and memorize the target language through drills, pattern practice, and simple conversation exercises. Alright, let's have another discussion. We all know that the grammar translation method is very popular, and that in this method, grammatical rules are taught very clearly. However, in the direct method, there is little or no analysis of grammatical rules. What do you think? Should teachers be very clear in explaining grammatical rules, or should they allow the students to think and work them out for themselves? Again, think of the advantages and disadvantages of both, and choose which you think is better to prepare for a good discussion in class. Right, so now we move on to the designer methods era, which was when researchers and teachers tried to liven up language education. This was around the time of the late 1960s and 1970s, so perhaps they were trying to add a bit of disco to English education. Perhaps we should change this slide. There we go, that's a bit more like it. We need to disco this up a bit. So put really simply, first, community language learning focused on the social aspect and friendly atmosphere of the classroom. The teacher was there as a guide for the students rather than a strict leader. Suggestopedia, again, aimed at lowering students' anxiety through relaxation from yoga or calming music or aromatherapy. In the silent way, the teacher hardly spoke at all, just giving students problems to solve and encouraging independence in learning. Then finally, we have total physical response and the natural approach, which aimed to again lower students' anxiety through a lot of input and not putting pressure on students to produce language until they are ready to do so. Just on a side note, you'll see the name Krashen as part of the natural approach, right? That's the name you'll see popping up from time to time in this course, so make sure you remember it. So what did you think of those teaching styles? Were there any there that you liked, or perhaps inspired some ideas in you? Share what you thought with others in class. Let's keep moving because I think we're a bit over time today. We finish up with the dawning of a new era, that is, some approaches to language teaching that have appeared in recent years. Our textbook covers two main ideas: notional function syllabuses, or syllabi if you prefer, and communicative language teaching. Notional function syllabuses place more importance on the function of language, or situations in which you are going to use the target language, than on the order in which grammar is presented. Situations might include shopping, traveling, or asking for directions. Communicative language teaching is very broad and difficult to discuss in a short video like this one. But very simply, CLT is about putting the focus on building students' fluency, but there is still importance placed on grammatical accuracy as well. I suggest you have a close look at the 7 characteristics on pages 31 and 32 of our textbook to get a better idea of what CLT is all about. If we have time, we might have a quick chat about fluency and accuracy, and which you think will receive more attention in your language classes.